Today's panel discussion is about launching and navigating a career in communications amidst the pandemic. Even as we deal with the uncertainty of the times we're in, a lot of us are also simultaneously trying to figure out our own career paths. So we decided to bring on board some very accomplished ComLead alumni that we have with us today, who can tell us more about how they've managed to do that with their own careers. We have with us Sarahi CA, Brittany Martin, Yvonne Shao, and Wancho Misa. And I'd like all of them to introduce themselves now. We can begin with Sarahi.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Well, hello everyone. I am Sarai. I am cohort 13, and I did both the digital media master program and the communications and network program. So I'm completely in love with the program. Absolutely, I had the best time there, and it definitely gave me all the skills that I required to build up a career. Initially, my background was more in video production, that's what I was sort of trying to get more on the digital media side of things. But communities and networks just changed my life. I'm currently working as a technical writer and digital communications manager for a children's book publisher, which is based in Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Although I have recently relocated to Hong Kong, so I've been doing remote working in very odd hours, but it's been like 2 months so far. So hello, everybody. It's very nice to meet you.
Thank you. Brittany, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Martin. I am part of cohort 14. I always have to think about it because it's been so long. I was part of the MCCN program with Sari, which was great. Got to spend a couple classes with her. I spent most of my career after the ComLead program at T-Mobile in Bellevue, Washington. I've recently moved down to Dallas, Texas in the last year. And so it's a little bit late here and dark, but I am so excited to be here and tell you guys a little bit more about my career journey and how incredibly important this program was to my success.
Thank you. Yvonne?
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, everyone. Yvonne here. I recently graduated, so it's not been a long time, and I am also serving as one of the alumni fellows, so I feel like I've never really left the program. But I'm representing one of the international students in the panel today, and I'm originally from Beijing, China. I'm currently a UX content designer at Microsoft, helping shaping the product experience for Dynamics 365 customer service. During my time at ComLead, I did a few internships, took a lot of classes, and I was also with the MCCN track. So very excited to talk about what has been happening during my time at ComLead too.
Awesome. Wancho.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Wancho, and I too just graduated. I was from cohort 18 rather. And prior to ComLead, my whole life was in the Philippines. So I am an international student. So been here 2 years. In the Philippines, I was doing content strategy for a global nonprofit, the World Wildlife Fund. And I felt that I needed to just grow more in the field. So ComLead was the best place to do that. And right now I am a content designer for Facebook. My role is based in Menlo Park in San Jose, Silicon Valley rather, in California. But right now, since it's the pandemic, I'm working remotely from Seattle. Yeah, excited to talk to you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and welcome to all of you, everyone, panelists, participants, everyone. I'd like to actually begin the session by asking each of you if you could tell us more about your roles, what you exactly do at work, and what kind of skills do you think are necessary to launch a career in a role like that. We can begin with Brittany.
Awesome. So my career path has been not traditional. When I started at T-Mobile, I was in corporate communications in Office of the CEO, managing executive branding for our CEO at the time, John Ledger, and doing all communications support. And that pretty much means whenever he's speaking to anybody internally, externally, our team made sure that he was prepped for any and everything. And so it was a little bit of comms, but a little bit of branding in there. If anybody is familiar with John Legere, he was a very, what we consider a maverick CEO. He was kind of out there. He definitely had a personal brand, and his brand was my job. And so everything that he wore, everywhere he went, there was a T on him somewhere. And what's interesting about that role is I was brought into it because of a teacher I had in comm lead who had started at T-Mobile and was a vice president. And I just happened to be graduating. And so it was a good connection and a good time. From there, I kind of stayed in communications. I worked in what they call sales communications, writing all frontline content for T-Mobile retail employees across the country. And then this is where my career kind of took a left to where I am now. So I've been working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for about 2.5 years now. It was something I'd done at T-Mobile in a voluntary capacity. I certainly have kind of a passion and affinity for the disability community, just for some personal reasons, but that's really where I started. And then I had this opportunity to take it as a career. And to be honest, it was not in my purview. I was very comms and marketing focused. Eventually I wanted to get into the NFL. So I was very focused in sports. And so I was just like, but this work makes me feel good. And I know we're making real changes for a lot of people. And that's really what drove me to kind of take the leap to try something different. But in retrospect, everything I did prepared me for this. From especially my experience in comm lead. I think the one thing about the MCCN track is this piece of storytelling. You don't realize how far that really takes you in your personal life, in your career. There's so many different connections that I was able to make in the program that really allowed me to now have, incredible impact. At T-Mobile, we have over 30,000 employees involved in our DE&I programming. And it's, my job and my team's job to keep them engaged and to bring more members on and to really continue to drive diversity, equity, inclusion throughout the organization. Some skills I think that in the program, I wouldn't have thought of as skills I needed to learn. But probably the biggest skill for the work that I do is influential leadership or leading without authority. And you realize that in order to do that, your communication skills need to be on point. And it's really interesting that in this work that you do, you really are driving for so much change. And this is not small change. You're trying to change perspective, you're trying to change mind, you're trying to change how companies think, how organizations work. And you have to be able to have those conversations and influence people in a way where it lands, right? And so that's probably the top skill that I think, going back, I wish I would have paid a little bit more attention to how I could have, gotten those skills earlier. I kind of learned it through the job, but that is probably, the one thing I would say, for any career, for any job, being able to influence people and change without having authority is really an incredibly powerful skill.
That is a great tip. Yvonne, would you like to go next?
Sure. If you can hear the very loud noises outside my window, if you can just ignore that. I am a content designer, which if you think about it, you can consider that as half a UX writer and half a UX designer. So I use my words to shape the product experience, from larger things like information architecture to smaller things to what the button should be called or what an error message should look like. So it's really marrying creativity and writing, which are both things that I'm extremely passionate about. Key skills that I think that is very important for this role is, it's pretty obvious, but it's fundamental for any communication professional, and that is being good at writing. It is microcopy most of the times, but even those smaller text, it's very crucial with helping users navigating through the product experience. How do you create an experience that doesn't create any confusions or just not letting the users think? They just can go through the entire product experience smoothly. That is my goal. So yeah, and I did quite a few internships before landing my job at Microsoft as a UX content designer. I thought I was going to go into marketing for the longest time, did a lot of social media and general communications work in nonprofits. And funny enough, all of these internships were found and landed with Comedy connections. I had colleagues that were in the Comedy program. I had one of my internship managers who was in ComLead, and my other internships, internship manager now is in ComLead. So the connection is just so strong there. I feel like I would just never get out of the world, but it's a good world to be at. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Pancho.
Hi. So before I worked with Facebook, I mentioned I was doing content strategy for the World Wildlife Fund. And because, yes, it's an international organization, but it was the Philippine office and it was a very flat management. So there wasn't a lot of people to do the work. So I was everything at once. I was the UX designer, I was the UX researcher, I was the UX writer, I was doing their social media, I was doing their email marketing, I was doing their corporate communication. So it was like, I felt like I was a jack of all trades and master of none. So that's why I went to ComLead to really specialize. And I took all of the UX and content strategy classes in ComLead, which was very helpful. Yeah, so with Facebook right now, I am also, like Yvonne, a content designer, but I work with the health team, specifically preventive health. So I'm pretty sure most of the people here have a Facebook account. If you have seen recently on your timelines, if there's any messaging about voting or about flu shots on your timelines, like that's what we call QPs, and that stands for quick promotions. And that's the sort of work that I'm doing. So I have to think of the overall strategy. Okay, so what does Facebook want their users to know? We have partners like the WHO and the CDC. So what I'm doing is I'm writing messaging for the flu during COVID and why it's so important, like why this year is the most important year to get a flu shot. So I have to basically just be like, I have to tell a story in Facebook's voice about why that's important and what are the best ways Facebook could communicate that. So I do a lot of the things that Yvonne does. But surprisingly, like I was coming in thinking I would do like micro copy, but I'm doing more like kind of like long form, because if you can imagine, like if you talk about flu and COVID, that's not micro copy. You have to talk about, you know, all these things, and I'm working on like debunking myths about vaccines and everything. So it's very important work, but very specific, very sensitive, because if you're doing health communications, you have to think of so many edge cases and so many particularities. Like I have to go through policy and legal and privacy and all these different steps, and I have to make sure the World Health Organization and the CDC are okay with me saying these things. So this is the skill that I wanna talk about. It's because with ComLead taught us about heads down work. It taught us about how to be good doing your own work, you know, but it didn't really prepare for the amount of work you have to do with other people, with the amount of work that you have to get checks on. So like it's almost like I am a content designer and a project manager at the same time, because I have to make sure that my content goes through all the checks, through all the levels of people, and I have to keep going back and forth. And you can imagine that's a lot of like just work. So that's one thing that I didn't expect to happen, but I'm surprisingly having a lot of fun with it, because I get to see, like when I speak to our lawyers, like, oh, I had no idea that I could look at it this way. I could speak to our privacy managers, and it's just like, it's so amazing that there's so many things involved, and that's a skill that is really important, especially when you're onboarding remotely. I'll go into this later, but that definitely is.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of communications work, like even Brittany mentioned earlier, can also be pretty quickly go into project management, like as an area. So that's true. Sarahi.
Yeah, so about my current role. So prior to being with Barefoot Books, I was living in Seattle, and I was working at Microsoft doing sales content. Similar to what Brittany was mentioning, what is the content that we're not putting just for facing on our website, but also what is the content that sales managers and the sales firm of Microsoft was sharing with their clients. So I was doing a lot of research about the industry, about all of the Microsoft products and how it would fit into each one of the industries for Latin America, the US, and Canada. And at the same time, I was LATAM Geo lead, which is my part of my role was managing relationships, stakeholder relationships with Latin America. So seeing which areas of the business weren't doing so well and how with content would be able to help them drive those numbers. And at the same time, I was working for Movimiento for Latino Seattle, which is translate Afro-Latino Movement of Seattle, which is a very close, important nonprofit in Seattle that I worked for about 2 years. And then when I moved to Boston, I still work with them remotely. And it was really fascinating because, of course, at Microsoft, I was using all the skills that I got in ComLead in terms of, content strategy, content creation. But with the mass, I was doing everything that we learned at MCCN, Communications and Network, storytelling, leading without authority, which is something that Brittany was mentioning, was so important, especially when you're working with communities, right? Because you want to make sure the community leaders are the ones who are driving the organization forward. And of course, I was managing their website, their social media, their email marketing, all of these things at the same time. And then when I moved to Boston for personal reasons, I was trying to make sure I found a job that I loved the mission, that I didn't have to be doing just 2 jobs at the time to find exactly what I was looking for. So that's where I landed with Perfect Books. And because it's a very small company, I am doing technical writing in the aspect of a little bit of UX design. We just recently launched a new site on Magento. So everything that was from creating the mockups, the content, working with designers, thinking about the communication strategy, all our email marketing. And I do a lot of project management, which I think is a very important skill to have, regardless, because it's a team of 3 marketers. One focuses more on the blog and content strategy, one focusing more on the outbound, bringing people into our website, and I make sure they're engaged and they convert. But that also means keeping all these moving pieces happening at the same time. So I'm the one who is project managing all these campaigns, which is very exciting. I love that skill. And I think I got some of that from the ComLead program, just because we had so many projects and so many classes that you have to keep up with. And then in terms of networks, I got the job at Microsoft because of a ComLead connection as well. So definitely, I think you should leverage the network that you have at ComLead. They're all wonderful people, smart people, and they're happy to help. That's the most great thing about it. Yep.
Thank you. I will come back to almost everything you mentioned in the next question, but I actually wanted to start off with Juancho and talk about how he was in the middle of his job hunting journey during the pandemic. He basically graduated this June, which was, like he mentioned earlier when we were talking, that wasn't the best time to graduate apparently. But look where he's now. So what I wanted to basically ask was, like, what was that like? What was your job hunting journey like? And what is it like to start a new job during the pandemic?
Right. So my last class was in March, late March, and that's when Seattle was shutting down. So I had my final class. I only had one class that was on Zoom, and that was my final for my last class. And it was just weird. And then because I'm an international student, we have limited days of unemployment, and all the international students here can feel me. So I was there saying, you're really going to give me 90 days of unemployment during the worst job market ever? That's like, I was thinking, like, this is not happening to me. Like, I was ready to, like, just go home, because I'm just like, there's no way. Job hunting remotely was, it was tough. It's honestly, treat it like a full-time job. You have to. It can't just be, I'll do it for 3 hours and then the next day I'll do it for 30 minutes. It has to be, when you wake up, you have to do stuff all the way until 5. Like, you have to do everything. And especially for people who want to get into UX, make sure that your portfolios are just as good as it can be. So, and portfolios are just a never-ending process of just like iterating, making it better, So that was very hard, and to be honest, quite disheartening, because a lot of people were being laid off. I was applying for a UX job. I'm from the Philippines, and people who were working for Uber, for Airbnb, for Lyft, they were getting laid off and applying for the same jobs that I'm applying for. So in my head, I'm like, why would they consider some Filipino over Americans, So like, the odds were against me. So I was trying to think strategically. So I was saying, okay, it might be unreasonable to just look for a full-time job. So I started looking for side gigs, and I found two, like quick. Like if like I think you have to give yourself some grace and be okay with side gigs, because side gigs work to hold off your I forget the term for international students. I'm blanking for some
The
reason.
OPT?
Yes, the OPT.
Status. Yeah.
Yeah. So side gigs help, and even if they're unpaid, they help. So get a side gig, especially in this environment. Just be comfortable with not having a full-time job. I mean, just give yourself grace. Like for me, I was like being so mean to myself. You know, like I had to remind myself that it's not me. You know, I'm not incompetent. I'm not, you know, unqualified. It's just the environment we're in. So give yourself some grace, give yourself some allowance, get a side gig, and keep working on that goal on getting a full-time job.
I think that's some great advice, even just for mental health, not even like for just job hunting. So yeah, that's great. Thank you. Going back to Sarahi, you mentioned like a little bit about your career journey. And it is like, I mean, I was looking at it earlier. It is a pretty fascinating one where you basically worked across, you know, a variety of different organizations. You mentioned you were at Microsoft earlier, and now you're in publishing. How did you navigate this career transition? And, you know, how does one pivot their career, whether it's like from role to role or organization to organization, or even just industry to industry?
Yeah, I guess that for me, it was all about finding the right mission. I think I was trying to find a company that would have that mission that I could support. Not that Microsoft didn't have that one, just I had to move, right? So I had to find another job. And then when I was doing my job hunting process, I wanted to find that organization that had that mission that I would put myself behind it, and Barefoot Books had that. I never thought of like, oh yes, my dream job is to be in publishing and I want to write a book. That is definitely not something that I had in mind. I just wanted to make an impact. I wanted to use the skills that I had to support something that would make an impact in the world. And Barefoot Books does that in a very special way, and when children are little. And it encompasses all of these values, and it has a beautiful manifesto. And one of the pieces that always talk to me is the part that says everyone has a right to be here. Because just as Juancho was mentioning, I am from Mexico, so I had to navigate all of these extra regulations of finding a job, finding someone who wants to, that it's okay hiring you with OPT, that knows that you might have to change to OPT STEM, and then do all of these processes to get you on board. And then after that, maybe discuss the possibility of a sponsorship, which definitely brings an extra layer of challenge to international students, but definitely makes it more resilient. So I guess in my case, navigating that was making sure I found the right organization, the right people I wanted to work with, and being always open to learning. I think that's everything. Like, yes, definitely changing from Seattle, which I love and it's my favorite city in the whole world, moving to Boston, which is it's of course university cities, but it's different in terms of culture, I would say. But I found the organization, and I mean, I'm still working with them, even that I'm now in Hong Kong, and I'm so grateful there. So yeah, definitely that would be my advice. Don't be afraid to keep learning, and then don't be afraid to find that, you know, I know it's easy to get bogged down, especially, you know, like doubt yourself, like maybe I don't have the qualities that they're looking for, right? But it's just, that's an extra layer as an international student that you have to learn to be comfortable with, and just keep trying, you know, keep trying. Don't be afraid to reach out. That's it.
Thank you. Talking about transitioning, I think I'd like to now talk to Brittany about her career transition that she mentioned a little bit earlier about. And just, you know, if you could share more about your career transition, how did that happen, and how did you navigate that in the middle of the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I guess, so they always say, and this is very true, that finding a job when you have a job is always, you know, the best route if you can. And to be honest, I have, again, been in T-Mobile for, you know, over 5 years. I've been in multiple organizations. I've had 4 different roles. And I've honestly grown up there. The 23-year-old me who started there is very different than who's here today. And you know, it's interesting, something that Sari said that really resonated with me was finding an organization that really has a mission and values that you align to. When I got into the DE&I space, it obviously, you know, for obvious reasons, that became, you know, top of mind for me. You know, we're creating a company where everybody should feel like they belong. And how do you do that? How do you set the stage for that? How do you welcome people in? But once they're in, how do you retain them? How do you develop them? You know, there's so many layers to just the DEI space and what you have to do there. And I think the longer that I was there, the more I really questioned myself in some ways, where I was like, is this actually an organization that aligns to me and my values and what I want for myself and my career and my goals? And it was really important that though I was comfortable in my work and it was, you know, a great company, I worked with good people, it's still important to have those moments where you check yourself to you know, I mean, you're giving all this energy, all these hours to an organization. And if you're feeling like there's not, you know, something's not meshing, or you're not feeling like this is going to be the best place, you know, for me, I had to almost allow myself to look for other opportunities because, you know, and first I should say T-Mobile is an amazing company. It truly is. It just, you know, we just went through a merger with Sprint. I mean, talk about shaking up a culture, changing the landscape of everything you do. And from a DE&I space, I mean, integration and M&A activity is no different for us. You know, we had to then combine everything that Sprint had done for the past 25 years in the DE&I space, bring it together with everything T-Mobile's done for the last 7 years, you know, they were much more tenured in this space than we were, and basically start over. You know, new employee resource groups, understanding your new mission, creating new branding, you know, bringing 30,000 more people into your company and hopefully creating a space where they feel like they belong. And so, you know, a lot of things change in that transition, you know, organizations change, leadership changes, lots of things shift and move. And again, that was really a moment for me to ask, like, is this still a place where I see myself, you know, continuing off my career? So I, you know, began actively looking, gosh, probably 6 months before I just got my recent offer. And to be honest with you, LinkedIn Premium was my best friend. I'm not kidding you. Every single application I went on a company site and applied to, I either got an automatic reply, some type of message, but the amount of people who will reach out to you with very specific jobs that align to your experience, if your profile is updated, that is really where I found a lot of, you know, really great interviews and companies. And to be honest with you, in the last 6 to 8 months, I've probably been on over 20 interviews, you know, but I always think about interviews as a time to practice and a time to network. So for me, an interview is never a wasted opportunity. You know, even if it's something that I'm like, okay, this is like a VP level role, I don't care, I'm going to apply. And if they want to talk to me, like, I'm going to talk to them, you know? And so take those chances for any role. And I think especially, you know, in working in the DE&I space, we talk to, you know, a lot of women about this, you know, about not doubting yourself, you know, looking at a job description. And, you know, there's a stat that, you know, if women aren't meeting at least 50% of the requirements, they don't apply at all. Whereas typically men, if they meet at least half, they're like, I'm doing it, you know? And that's a shift that we want to change, right? That's something that we want to make sure that you have the confidence to go into these conversations, knowing who you are, knowing what you can bring to the table, and knowing your story. And I think that's the biggest thing that Commonly helped me hone was like, what was my story? Who's Brittany? Like, what is Brittany bringing to this organization, to this company? And when I got comfortable with that and I started going on my interviews, it was kind of like, okay, like I may not be getting these jobs and I'm feeling more comfortable in these situations and telling people who I am and what I can bring to their team. So I started interviewing with a company back in September, and it was one of those situations where like I actually left, I went and got married, came back after a couple weeks, and I was like, hey, like just checking in, you know, doing my normal check-ins, and they were like, oh yeah, someone's gonna call you tomorrow. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. Like they're gonna let me down nicely. So he calls me and we probably talked for like 10 or 15 minutes before he told me anything about a decision. And it was very like, well, how was the interview experience? And I was just very honest, you know, I was really excited about the role. And I was like, regardless if he's gonna tell me no, like, this is really how I feel, you know? And 15 minutes into the conversation, he gave me an offer that was, something that, was beyond my wildest dreams. And so I'll be starting with Peloton next month, and I'm super excited. And I'll still be working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. They have something, and if you haven't heard of it, it's called the Peloton Pledge. I think like many companies, once a lot of the civil unrest happened in the United States, there has been a lot more attention to the DE&I space. You will see companies all over the country, standing teams up, putting initiatives together, and being very specific about how they're going to drive the DE&I space forward. Because I think what companies are seeing is that it's not shouldn't really be a choice anymore, right? It's a business imperative. It's what we do and how we do it, and it's important to what we do. So, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing about looking for a job in this space, and I think, this space or not, having the confidence in yourself and what you can bring to the table is crucial. Because if you don't believe in yourself, how are those people on the other side of the screen, the other side of the phone, or the other side of the table going to believe in you too? You have to know your mission so deeply that people can't deny it. That when you come into a room and you have a conversation and you tell people about what you do and what you see, for their organization or for things that you've done, it has to be clear. And I realized that in a lot of my previous interviews, when I was graduating from ComLead in 2015 and I was going into the job market, I didn't know who Brittany really was yet. I was kind of piecing things together. Like, I learned this, I could say I did that, but like, what I learned was that who I was and what I could bring to the table was more about me as a human being and less about, the classes that I took and, the things that I've just gained over the years, right? So it's really important to again, believe in yourself. And, Juancho said it, like, you can get really discouraged really quickly. I think in that time, I think it'd taken me probably 4 months to land at T-Mobile after graduating. So, I mean, gosh, I don't envy being in that space. But truthfully, I think if someone would have told me like, hey, stop trying to impress people and stop trying to like be somebody that you're not, and let people see who you are, I mean, there's no harm in that. And I think what I also realized lately is if people don't, if they're not vibing with who I am, if who I am doesn't work for them, then that's not a place I need to work, or that's not a person I need to work for. I think I was for so many years in this space in my career where I was like desperate for the next opportunity. Like, I just was like, please, somebody give me something, that I wasn't, how people say you're interviewing the company or you're interviewing the team. I wasn't doing that. I was really focused on just getting the job, just getting the paycheck, and getting to the next level. But it's really important to understand who you're going to be working with and who you're going to be working for. Because, down the line, it can catch up to you. And so that's another, thing I would say is no matter what, in person, virtual, whatever, make sure that you're showing up as your true self, and pay attention to the response to that, because that is really important too down the line. Okay.
I think that's a great tip. And also, I think we talk a lot about authenticity in almost all of our comedy classes as well. So that definitely, that's a great message to kind of reinforce all the time anyway. So that's great. And your point about people applying for roles they think they're not qualified enough for, etc. That reminded me of something I read in an article yesterday about how if you're basically applying for a role you're fully qualified for, there is no space for you to grow in that role. So what are you even going to do after a certain point? So in fact, it's not ideal to apply for a role you think you're fully qualified for. So it's always a great idea to kind of look at something that will give you the space to grow. So yeah. Next question is for Yvonne. Do you think, we've changed, obviously, in the last few months, everything's changing so rapidly, so much, everything's crazy. But from your experience, do you think there are any professional skills that have kind of gained a renewed importance in this time? And if you can talk about a few that you might think are new.
Digital communication, because we're all online now. It is so important to communicate to the audience strictly on digital now. Look at us, we're hosting this event that is traditionally offline, online now, social media. And I recently picked up my new addiction to TikTok. Having strong skills within the digital media space is so important, and how you tailor your message to communicate to your audience in this new platform. It's super important. Doesn't matter if you're in the UX space or you're in the marketing space. And I see this continuing to be this way, even if we moved out from the COVID phase. Just because we're adapting to a new way of communicating, and we're transitioning how we're communicating to our stakeholders and audience in the sense. So I can definitely see digital communication being a very key skills right now and in the future. Yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing that's on top of my mind right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think some of you touched on this earlier, and I'm addressing this to all four of you right now, whoever wants to go ahead if they've not talked about it already. What were some of the biggest challenges during your job search after you graduated, whether it was like right away, like a couple of months ago, whether it was earlier, like, you know, the first job you were kind of looking for right after graduation? And how did you overcome those challenges?
I can go. I guess.
Oh, okay.
If no one else is gonna say. I did a full-time job hunt for 5 months. And it wasn't pretty. Again, this goes to a lot of mental health talk about how it's so easy to feel like you are a failure, and that you'll never make it in the US. You know, coming from an international student. Anchor yourself in your friends and your family. You just don't do this alone. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like Yvonne mentioned that all of her gigs were from like ComLead. Like ComLead is okay. Full disclosure: a master's degree is it's more than, I mean, more than the classes and the lessons that you learn. It's the network that you make. Masters is all about the network that you make. So when, like, for cohort 20, and for those who are thinking of coming into cohort, when you cohort 21 rather, when you come in and you have group work, like, make sure that you are looking at this like as a networking opportunity, and not just like a college assignment that you have to pass out. Like, show your group mates that you can do it, because who knows, when you're job hunting, these people could be in a position to refer you, and you don't want them to be like, yeah, but in our project you were not really very, you weren't very helpful. Yeah, right. So like, ComLead is the best place to really widen your network. And so yes, it will be tough. The job hunting will be tough, but ComLead really is your best resource for to navigate this pandemic.
I'm just going to piggyback on that. I mentioned the mental strain that can get onto especially international students. Almost every 2-3 months, we get some new international student-related policy change that will affect and scramble all of your plans. And it's very important for you to have a support group of people who understand the experience that you're going through. Like, I ran to Juancho a lot about everything. And I don't think I would be able to stay sane, especially with COVID and with all the immigration policy, with the election coming up, with my current job as well, without having a solid support group. So I would say that is probably my biggest challenge. I didn't necessarily go on the job hunting process during COVID, luckily. I landed my position just a few months before COVID happened. So I feel very fortunate about it, but yeah, having that support group means everything. And even if you're not an international student, like, job hunting sucks. It's not fun, it's not easy, it's discouraging, and you doubt yourself. Like, the imposter syndrome gets to you so bad that you just like want to throw hands and be like, that's it, I'm done. But having people who can just let you know that, hey, you're overthinking again, you're doing well, you're doing great, we're gonna get through this together, is so important. So make sure you have your support group ready to go.
Yeah, I would add, or go ahead, sorry.
No, you go, Brittany. I'll wait.
I think one of my biggest challenges, and this was like, I was, to Yvonne's point, I was getting in my own head. I was getting in my own way. And I think what I pinpointed in how I was doing that is I had very specific roles in mind that I wanted. And and then someone told me, or I read something, or I don't even know where it came from, but it was like, be firm in your goals, but be flexible in your approach. And that always stuck with me throughout my career and how I make decisions and what opportunities I lean into going forward. But I think it's important to not only cut yourself a little slack, because like, I think all of us can agree, like, it sucks. There's not a single fun part about this. You know, really leveraging your network as much as you can, you know, really not being afraid to reach out to this Calm Lead network, because there is somebody everywhere. I can tell you that. I mean, when I went to T-Mobile, I think, you know, 2 more joined me there, and then there was a couple that was there before. And so, you know, leverage that. But I think the biggest thing too is again, just be flexible with yourself and with what you're looking for. If something seems like, hey, I might have the skills for that, but it's maybe a little outside of the box, maybe not exactly what you had in mind, like, I had to really pull myself away from, you're going to get the perfect job after you have a master's degree. Like, in my head, I just was like, well, I just worked so hard. Like, I should be able to get this. It should be, you know, easy to some degree. And it wasn't. I mean, it was like doors are in your face closing all day long. And, you know, sometimes the doors that aren't as appealing at first are the ones who have the best things behind them. And so I would just, you know, really consider, as you guys are searching and thinking about different opportunities, just try to be as broad as possible, because for a lot of us, getting in the door is what we need to do right now. It's not about having the perfect job. We just need to get our name in someone's mouth and get in the company. And you can move around once you are. You know, I think that's another thing that people forget is, like, when you're in an organization, especially a big one, you can get in there, do something for a year or 2, and then go do something else. You know, I mean, there's so many opportunities when you're at these large companies, especially in the Seattle area. So that's just one thing I would say is, you know, I really challenge myself a lot through the process, and just having something in mind and really driving towards that, and then having to realize, like, hey, you need to switch things up and not be so stubborn.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I don't think I have any additional thing to add, but I completely agree with Yvonne, Juancho, and Brittany were saying. In my case, when I moved to Boston, that was when Trump got elected, and a lot of these policies started changing again. So obviously it was very, very hard. Obviously trying to find a new job in a new state where you have basically no connections. And I definitely reached out to Anita at the time, and she put me in contact with some comm lead, at least to, you know, have some sense of community over there. But it can definitely take a toll to your mental health. So having family, friends, and, you know, coworkers or colleagues around you supporting you, and, you know, talking to this person, don't forgetting that you are definitely qualified for those roles, it's super important. And again, don't give up. It can be very tough, especially when regulations are changing, and then you don't know what's going to happen the next day or next week, or when you have, you know, 3 months to find a job and everything that you're getting is rejections. It can be really, really hard, but just keep trying. You'll come out better out of it. But yeah, I definitely resonate with everything you guys were saying. I was like, oh man, yeah, that was so tough, but you just have to keep going, definitely.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I think I'm also seeing this in the chat that, like Sarai was saying, everyone kind of relates to everything you guys have said. So yeah, true. And my final question before we moved on to the audience Q&A part was going to be about sharing specific job search related advice that you got. But I think all of you did kind of already give great tips in all of the answers you already shared. So I think that we've got that covered. So what we'll do now is kind of open up the conversation to questions the other participants might have. What we'll do now is kind of begin with the questions we have in the general chat. What I will do is I will just ask the person, so people who've sent the question in the general chat, I think would like to ask them themselves. So I will just ask the person to kind of unmute themselves and ask the questions. After that, we'll address the questions that have been sent privately that one of us can ask you directly. And Yvonne has to kind of hop on to another meeting, unfortunately. She's kind of in demand today because she's joining another career panel of her undergrad college after this at 6. So what we'll do is, I think there are a couple of questions that Yvonne could take before leaving. And then we will ask questions that are directed at Sarahi, because she also has to hop on to another meeting around 6:10. So we will kind of go with the questions in that order. So yeah, starting with Yvonne, I think Ikram has a question for you. I think she has it for you and Wancha both, but Yvonne could kind of take that question.
Thank you so much for being here and for taking the time. Well, yeah, my question was specifically for both of you. So I guess, well, I have 2 questions. My first question is, like, what did you guys do to prove yourself or like prove to the company that you are worth the added expense to get a visa sponsorship? And then my second question is, since a lot of companies have transitioned to working remotely or working from home, how do you think this will affect visa sponsorships in the future?
Oof. That's hard. First of all, I want you to shift your mindset a little bit. Instead of proving that you're worth of the sponsorship, you don't want to work for a company that doesn't think you're worth it. You don't want to be there. Like, they're not worth your time. You're not going to be happy there anyways, because they don't value you as a talented individual. They only look at you from the visa end and thinking you're too big of an expense for the company. I still haven't had the visa talk with my employer yet. To be fully transparent with you, I'm still using my OPT. And I think today there's some new changes to the H-1B policy that was in place. And, like, there's just so many changes every day. And for me, I'm just kind of going with the flow and trying my best to ignore the news because it can really get into your head. But the right place will know that you're worth the time and worth the additional few $1,000s of sponsoring you. Because they see your talent. And until then, like, I would say, like, it's depending on different people's preferences. Like, I love bringing up about the visa issue up front, but some people don't bring it up because they might stop them from even getting an interview. But I do have the mindset that if they consider my visa status as something that would be taking disadvantage of myself, then I don't want to be there anyways. So I bring it up front. But it's up to you on how you want to strategize your job search based on the situation you're in. But that's kind of where I see it. And with working remotely, oh boy, I don't know. I would hope that this opens up for more job opportunities for people all over the country, just because there's the flexibility of hiring locations, and you can see a lot of big tech companies shifting to having the option of working remotely permanently for their workers as well. But I honestly don't know how that's going to affect us. I would hope that it's only positive in the long run. I'm optimistic about it, but you'll never know. Like, something might change in the next 3 months, and something might change after the election too. So we'll see.
I have something quick to add to that also. When you're an international student, you can bring something very unique to the table that people in America cannot bring. So I think it's us being non-Americans thinking that, I don't know, there's this weird like colonial mentality that, yeah, like we fall under like the victim card, where no, like we have experienced the world that other people have not. Bring that into your portfolio, bring that into your application. They will see that and they'll be like, this person knows. This person has like a, just a multicultural, like a broader view of how the business can reach its goals. So use that to your advantage.
Thank you so much. That was honestly beautifully said. Thank you.
I would just want to add, because I did go through that whole process. I went from the OPT to the STEM OPT to the sponsorship. And it's definitely, obviously has been challenging, but I definitely agree with Yvonne. You have to work for a company that can appreciate who you are. And in that case, for me, it was Perfect Books. And I had the opportunity to work with them privately, having this conversation about visa sponsorship. And it's tough because from people who have applied for the H-1B, it's a lottery. So you can have all the documents ready and send your application in, and you have to send it right in the 5 days before it has to get in. And then if it goes in, great, but then it goes through the lottery process, which means it goes through 2 lottery processes. And the first time we applied, it did not get selected. So obviously it was like, what am I gonna do? What's gonna happen? But with my company, they try different ways because they value what I had to bring to the table to figure it out. Okay, so if maybe we could try again the next cycle. Is there another visa we could apply and try to figure it out? So definitely I agree. Shifting that mentality from oh, they're not gonna like me, or I'm gonna be an extra expense, or I'm gonna be an extra burden. It's just you have something unique, like Juancho was saying, to bring to the table. And if you find the right company, it's gonna work out. It's not easy. I'm not saying, oh yes, it was super easy. We just talk about it. It was a process that took months, and it was late nights researching together, okay, what would be the best approach? But it's definitely doable. Just finding the right company, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Amy, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi. Hello, hi, I'm Amy. And first of all, I just want to thank everyone who took time to make this event possible. I really appreciate it. Just a little background. First of all, I didn't know that I accidentally intruded into this event because I'm not a comms lead student. I actually graduated from MSIM in June. So I graduated in June, and I have been on the hunt for UX and product design position ever since. So I have a question for Juancho and Yvonne, specifically that how do you guys have any tips in navigating through LinkedIn and reaching out to recruiters on positions that are now available? Yeah.
Yvonne, I'd let you take this. You have 3 minutes.
I think having informational interviews without the intention of landing a job and hoping this person will give you a referral is extremely important. It's always good learning opportunity to see how they got to the position they're at, what resources they have used, or even having them introduce you to other people to talk to has been extremely beneficial for me in understanding the scope of work that will be happening within the UX world. And, like everyone lends to where they're at with some kind of help from other people. So people are very open with helping you and giving you opportunities to learn more about their career journey. So I would recommend that. And then unfortunately, like the UX field is flooded with junior designers and junior content strategists. So it is hard. You're definitely right that it is not being easy right now, and you're not alone in the situation. And there are a lot of big contracting agencies in the Seattle area. And I would definitely reach out to those staffing agencies and just kind of keep your resume and your portfolio in their hands, and you'll never know. Sometimes they would just directly reach out to you if they have any positions open. That's kind of my advice. Juancho, do you have anything?
I would say yes to that. Info interviews are key, and if you could find a mentor or several mentors even, that really helps. So if you know someone who can introduce you to a mentor, just tell them your life story, and it's good to have like an icebreaker or like a connection to this person. Do that because they could give you more focused feedback on your resume, on your portfolio, and basically like your interview skills. Like they could even do mock interviews with you, and it's really valuable.
Thank you. Before Yvonne has to exit, I'd just like to say a big thank you to her for being here and for giving some great insightful tips and advice. So thank you so much, and have fun with your next career panel. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Oh, and feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm there. Left the link here. Bug me. I enjoy you guys bugging me, so it's all good. All right.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Now I think we can address the questions for Sarahi first. Thank you so much for everyone's understanding for this kind of weird order of questions going on here, but that's how we're doing it. I'm looking at the chat right now. I think we have a couple of questions that people have sent in privately, especially for Sarahi. Isabel, would you like to ask one?
Yeah, so I have a question for Sarahi. In small companies and nonprofit organizations, communicators wear a lot of hats. So how do you manage accomplishing multiple tasks at once, especially when working remotely?
I go back to think, and obviously you discussed that with your manager, but thinking about what's the one priority that's going to make more impact on the business or on the organization, and then take it down from there. It can be very challenging. I don't joke about this, but when we were interviewing for some other roles at Barefoot Books, I would always say that Barefoot Books is like live television. You have one thing over the other. You have 5 seconds before going into air, and then, you know, commercial break. And I love that. I definitely thrive on really fast-paced environments. But it can get sometimes challenging when you have, you know, 5 product launches in 1 month and you're trying to figure out how to do it. But just have to step back a little bit and think, okay, which one of these is going to bring the most impact to the business or to the organization, and then take it from there.
Awesome, thank you. There are now, I think there are like a couple of general questions for all 3 of you. So maybe we can just start addressing those now. The first of which is also another private question. I'm curious to get more data from panelists about the number of jobs they've applied to, the number of first round interviews. Basically, what has that funnel for you look like, from applications to first round to second round to offers, if you'd like to share anything.
I am trying to find my spreadsheet, but you go, Brittany.
I knew you would have it tracked. Like, I don't know why, just like, if anyone, I knew you would track it. That is so funny. I guess I'll start. I guess I have 2 like chunks of time. Right after comm lead, I can confidently say I applied to probably about 100 jobs, probably got rejected by, or even heard back from 30 of those. And then probably had interviews 5 places, and that included T-Mobile. When I went through this most recent round of interviewing, first of all, I have the longest interview like time ever with Goldman Sachs this year. Like, I don't know how people, it was insane. I started interviewing there like last September, and I think I finally I made it to the last round, like was feeling good about it. And then in April, and mind you, I had interviews this whole time. Like, I think I talked to almost 20 people. Like, it was so crazy. I've never seen anything like it before. And of course, I got rejected. So I was like, wow, okay, well, 8 months later. So that one alone took up a lot of actual interviewing that I did in the last year. But I would say, I think I applied for, I would say about 40 jobs in the last year-ish. And again, I'm one of those people who I always like to keep my options open. Like, there are opportunities that pop up left and right all the time. Like, I'm a firm believer that, like, if you want to continue to progress and to grow and to develop, you can't be stuck in one place to do it. So, so that's kind of the why behind that. And then I would say, before I landed at Peloton, I interviewed, including Goldman Sachs, at, I think about 10 places, all for D&I roles, and at every level, from manager to director to vice president. And yeah, it's rough. I mean, it really is. And I mean, the numbers for comm lead, I think, would be so staggering. If you went like by cohort to see like what the data is, I'd be interested.
Wancho?
I would say, easily 100, over 100. And I interviewed for maybe only a handful, like 6 or 7. So really, like, not a lot. And like, what I want you guys to know is that I didn't land Facebook the first time. I applied to this same position 4 times. I made it sometimes to the first round, and then the recruiter would say, you're too junior, or you're not for us. But I'm just like, I can do this job. So I kept doing it, and I made it. So a lot of it isn't you. A lot of it is the mood the recruiter you're talking to is in. It's hard truth, but it's true. Like, I applied for the same job. Why did I get it the 4th time? Like, it's just so it's definitely skill, and it's also like the way I think you present yourself to a recruiter, and if the recruiter, like, is receptive to your kind of vibe or your energy, that's very important also. So if you don't make it the first time, it's not the end. Just keep trying.
Thank you. Sarahi, if you think, I think you wanted to leave by 6 also, but we just kept you around for longer. If you really do have to go, I think it would be fine. Thank you so much for being here and for being here for the extra time that you are.
I appreciate it. I'm so sorry I have to leave, but it was so nice meeting everyone. And yeah, I'm also available on LinkedIn if you guys want to chat or talk. I'm there. And nice seeing you, Brittany, as well.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
What we'll now do is kind of go to the questions we have in the general chat, and Brittany and Moncho can help answer those. I think there was a question from Chad earlier, if he'd like to unmute himself and ask the question.
I think he is not here.
Okay.
Yeah, but here's a question from Singh. So how did the ComLead program specifically prepare you guys for your current job, and why ComLead over other graduate programs?
You want to start, Wancho? You want me to start?
I can go. Like it's gonna be short. So for the people in the UX field, there's always a question with UW. It's either ComLead or HCDE, and that's always the two end. And I say, okay, if you want HCDE, yes, granted, they do go deeper into UX. They do go deeper into the nitty gritty of that field, but there is no mission. There is no story. ComLead is all about the advocacy of your work. And that is why ComLead, I think, for me, wins. Because you could always learn those skills, by yourself or when you're working. But purpose-driven work is unparalleled. So you take that from ComLead. You take that and just be the best storyteller that you can be. Because that's what ComLead prepares you to be. It prepares you to just be this person with like so much magnetism and so much this a person filled with mission, and that makes you like shine, that makes you radiate. So use that. So ComLead for me, yeah, if you ask me ComLead over HCD, obviously I'll say ComLead.
So first of all, I agree with Juancho 100%. I think the biggest thing that ComLead taught me was how to impact change, how to identify a story, to identify emotion, to identify who you're talking to, understanding your audiences. And again, at the time, D&I was not on my radar at all. So it's really interesting how, I look back and I'm like, wow, everything I did in ComLead was preparing me for this. Like it all was. And I think, so how I actually ended up in ComLead was another networking story. I went to University of Washington for my undergrad. I graduated in 2012, a long time ago. And I was a communications major, and I had this fabulous teacher. Her name was Professor Kuchu. If you guys are any ComLead alum out there, she used to be the associate director. But I actually spent a whole quarter with her in Italy. She was kind of my professor when I studied abroad in Rome. And you talk about mentors, and she was so much more to me than that. She was a mentor, she was a friend. But I think something that I don't think has been mentioned yet is we talk about, and I don't know if you guys have heard this before, but you guys talk about sponsorship, but I mean this in a different way, but a mentor versus a sponsor. And a sponsor is somebody ultimately who's going to bring you up in a room when opportunities arise, or they're going to set you up for those opportunities when you're not around. Whereas a mentor typically is more, somebody who can help you with, personal things like, interviewing and, things of that nature. But a sponsor is really somebody who's going to bring you up in the rooms that matter. And Lisa was one of those people for me. When I was kind of figuring out my career, I graduated from undergrad and I was doing some marketing work, but it wasn't really my thing. And I knew I wanted to go to grad school. And she was like, there's this program I think you might like. And it was the best thing I ever did, and from that, again, like I built another network, got me to the next level. Like those connections, Wancho was not lying. Like when you go to grad school, you pay for the network, and it's so true. Like the people who you meet here and who you make connections with is the most important thing. And I think that was another thing that ComLead taught me, is that even when you move on and you're in an organization, like make connections across your team, make connections out of your team, make connections with people who do things that you could never think you could do, right? Because at the end of the day, like you never know who's going to be a hiring manager. You never know who's going to be a business owner in 5 years. And you never know what they thought of you and if they could bring you in. So I think that was another really key thing that Calmly taught me, and that was super valuable in the program.
Sorry. I think we have a question from George in the general chat. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question? If he's still around.
I don't think George is still around, but I can read the question.
Yeah, I think it's a great question.
Let me go back to the chat. Wait a second. Where is George? Oh, okay. So he said that he's been working for the daily newspaper and feel like he has storytelling skill down, but not enough. What can he do, or who should he talk to if he wants to expand on his skill set? Content strategy, marketing, project planning, etc. And what are the alternative ways besides from getting an internship to earn experience?
I feel like this was answered earlier, where it's you have to like it would be very helpful to get a mentor, so that person can really help you navigate. And another way, like if you can't land an internship, like kind of make your own internship. Like you like sorry, like I can only speak for my field, but with UX, if you use a specific app all the time, like for me, I use Venmo a lot, and I saw a lot of inconsistencies with Venmo's UX. So I did my own Venmo revamp and post that on your portfolio, and then people will see it. People will tag other people, and then it just works. So if you can't find anything, make something on your own.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Brittany, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say another thing that I did that helped me a lot outside of an internship was I volunteered with nonprofits. So again, athletics is really my space. So I worked with Seattle Adaptive Sports for, 5 years. Then I was also the Vice President of Marketing Communications for the Eastside Junior College Football Program. So these are ways that regardless of what I did for work, I was able to say, hey, I can provide value. Here's what I can do. Here's what I can show you I can do. And the best thing about nonprofits is they always need money. And when you can prove that you can bring money, regardless if you did it through storytelling, regardless if, whatever you did, it shows value, right? So I think, I never had an internship in my whole life. So, they're important, yes, but I think that, a lot can be done without them. And, Wancho mentioned earlier about side gigs. There's side gigs too that are free, like they're not gonna pay you, but you get to say you did something really cool, right? And so, just kind of being open to some other ways of showing experience. And the cool thing about nonprofit work is you're doing something good most of the time, right? And so it's another way to build your network. So it's just another thing to consider, I would say.
Thank you. The next question is actually for you, Brittany, from Sukirat. If they'd like to unmute themselves.
Hi, Brittany, I actually have a question for you, but I think Juanacho, I think you can kind of answer it too. Were there like specific classes that kind of prepared you for your career today? I'm interested in HR, specifically diversity and inclusion, but like what kind of like classes does CommLead provide?
So I think and again, this was not my goal at the time. So I don't think I was thinking about this as intentionally as you are. So you're 10 steps ahead of me. But there was a class I took, I might have to go back and look, but I think it was like something like global ethics in marketing or global ethics in communications or something to that effect. I think it was Dost. I don't remember her last name who taught it, but that was a really good class. And it was more focused. Her actual job was corporate social responsibility, which I would encourage, if you're interested in the D&I space, look into CSR as well, because if you're really just driven towards that purpose and mission-based work, big companies have both of them a lot of the times. You're going to have diversity and inclusion, which a lot of times lands in HR. I've seen corporate social responsibility, though, be aligned to like corporate communications, because it's about the external, brand of the company, what we're doing in our communities, et cetera. So that class, I think, like more than the others is more specific to the space, right? Where you're considering like the actual ethical implications of an Exxon campaign, or when you're thinking about where Chevron is in Africa, what are they doing for the communities of the people who live there, right? And you start to think through like, okay, these are big companies that are making a lot of money, right? And on the backs of a lot of people. And so it's just, if you can find ways to bring that up in your classes, I think that was the best thing about ComLead, was that every project you have, you can kind of tailor it to your interests. So I would, encourage you to start, looking into some, companies that maybe have done D&I really well, and you're like, hey, like that's something I want to learn more about, or things of that nature. I think that would be my best advice, because I don't feel like there was anything that was like so D&I specific, but I know, there's something you can pull from every class for the space. I think the one thing about D&I is you're never going to be an expert. Like I tell people that all the time. Like I could do this for 50 years and I'll still never be an expert. Why? Because you cannot be an expert in every human being on the planet. It's not possible, right? But you can, practice inclusive communications down to, the job descriptions that are written, to the emails that you send, to the copy that you provide, thinking about how you're framing things, even in your projects, right? When you're in, some of those big core classes and you have to tackle an issue, find a D&I related issue. Those are some ways I think you can bring it into your studies that, because I just don't think there's anything super direct. But again, I learned something and took something from every class to the next level.
Pancho, would you like to share?
I think for me and for you UX people, the UX class that really opened my mind was UX psychology with David Evans. Yeah, see, so some people are nodding like, yeah, that was amazing. It was so amazing. And even if you're not into UX, if you want to try to see what this whole UX thing is about, I would suggest you take that class. And it's psych, so regardless if you go into UX or not, it's very much relevant to any job as long as you're talking to other people,
Yeah, I agree. I've taken that class, so I can definitely vouch for that. I think we have one more question from Paula, which I think Brittany already kind of addressed earlier about working in the nonprofit sector and how you can kind of break into the area. You did mention just kind of like, I think diving right into it. If you have anything to add to that, Brittany?
I think the one thing that kept me away from like working in nonprofit, and I'm just going to be really real with you guys, like I did a PR project in undergrad, and our project was to go into the nonprofit and the corporate sectors to kind of understand what PR was like there. And after taking a much deeper dive into a larger nonprofit, ultimately I knew I'm not going to make enough money here. That was a big driver for me, to be honest with you. I love the work of nonprofits, which is I volunteer my time to do it, but it wasn't something that I was like, yeah, I'm going to get paid to do this work and like think it's going to really, take me where I want to get to. So just in full transparency, and with the way that Seattle's rent is set up, I still remember it's hard to take a job that's, a lot lower than what you need to survive there. My experience in the nonprofit space is they just honestly don't have as much capital to spare. So that's why I went the volunteer route with nonprofit. But again, there was so much value in doing that.
Thank you. That's great. One, I think, other final question we have that was sent privately was related to, again, the job search and kind of funneling down your like the organizations you applied for versus the ones you got into and stuff. So in that process, did you kind of look at salary data for the roles or the industries or the organizations you were applying for, and where did you get that kind of data, and how did you kind of just go about getting that information? Both of you.
So I started mine with so those job interviews that I did get far and they did tell me how much they made. I made sure to have that in a sheet, and then I also have friends who are working in this field, and they are in like the East Coast or in the Midwest, so I kind of know what they're making. So I could kind of like already see like how much the average is for this. And there's a federal website, in fact, that has the average salaries. I forget what it's called, but it's a federal website. So that's a very valuable resource. Yeah. So just have a sheet where you can track everything.
Is it the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
I think so.
You can look it up. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, Brittany.
I would say the other thing I did, to be honest, like what really changed the game for me on LinkedIn, like in the last 6 months, like, and I got exceptional, like a lot more attention once I did this, was I just got LinkedIn Premium. And I mean, the biggest thing is like, and you guys all know this, right? Like you guys are all storytellers, to have a strong summary, to be something that people are like, oh, like that's different. I didn't, like, let me learn more about this person, right? Like and I think this goes back to what Wancho said about like, really digging into your individuality. Like if you were not from here, that is a strength. Like he is right. There are millions of people here and millions of professionals who do not have the same experience as you. You have something to bring to the table. I mean, and it's an incredible perspective and skills that people may not know, but highlight that, make sure that's really at the top of your pitch, whenever you're giving it. But the other thing that LinkedIn Premium does is when you can open yourself up to recruiters. I know a lot of people right now have that like green, like open to work thing. That's one thing you can do, but you can also on the back end, open yourself to recruiters. You can set specific roles that you would be interested in. Another thing that I did is I looked at a ton of job descriptions of things that I wanted to do. And I pulled the key skills out and put those in my skills. I mean, I knew they were my skills too, right? I wasn't lying. I just needed to know specifically what they were looking for. So when they searched, I was going to come up first, right? So being strategic about your profile. But the other cool thing about LinkedIn Premium, and this is totally not an ad, it just honestly was helpful. They allow you to see salary insights, but they also allow you to see applicant insights. So if I apply for this job, this director job, whatever, it'll tell me what % of applicants have a master's degree, what % of applicants have X number, level of experience. It'll tell me what skills I have match up with the skills that they have, that they're looking for in this role. And a lot of times it will have that salary estimate. So that was just honestly such a helpful tool for me, and really just setting myself up like out in the public in the best way I could possible.
Both great resources, great platforms. Thank you so much. I think that's about it with the questions we had. If there's anyone who still has any questions, maybe just please share them. Like we can wait for a couple of minutes for that. But I think it looks like that's about all the questions we had for today. So thank you so much. I loved how insightful and how practical all your answers and advice and tips were. And I'm sure everyone here will appreciate those. So thank you so much for, first of all, agreeing very happily to be a part of this event and then sharing all your experiences with us. And I think a lot of people also mentioned in the chat how reassuring it is to kind of hear even the negative aspects of this whole job search experience that everyone goes through, because that's not something we hear very often. So again, thank you for sharing those things about your experience as well.
Well, thank you. And same with Yvonne and Sarai. Please find me on LinkedIn, reach out if you have any other questions or want to chat. I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Yeah, before thanking everybody, I just want to tell people that you are qualified. And if you think that you're not, like if, for example, me, I had more marketing background and I wanted to get into UX, I went to my mentor and I was saying, I feel like I'm an imposter because I have more experience with marketing than content strategy. And she's just like, marketing, you were essentially designing an experiences. You were designing a marketing experiences, but you were still a designer. So use that when you're applying for a content design position. Use that, and it was so simple, but it was like a big aha moment to me. Like, oh, like yeah, like I'm not an imposter. Like yes, I did design experiences. So like, if you're thinking about a shift in your professional life, or if you think that you're not qualified, no, frame your experience in a way that it fits the job description and bring what you have that is unique. And that's going to make you stand out. So that's just my parting words, that I know it seems like it's an impossible task. Like it's just so, I don't know, like it just won't happen. Like I told you guys, I was ready to go home, but then you have to power through. You can't give up. And if you feel like giving up, reach out to the people around you because you need it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you to the two of you. I also already thank Sarahi and Yvonne, and thank you to all the participants who joined here and asked these amazing questions beyond the questions that we already had. And also thank you to everyone from ComLead who helped with this event, whether they're on the call right now or not. Like the team at ComLead is so amazing. Everyone helped set this event up very, very well. So thank you to everyone.